This tool is a hollow chisel mortiser. It drills square holes in wood, and it's a great help when making cabinets or furniture. This particular example is a Powermatic Model 400, and I believe it was made in the year of our Lord 1976. It came out of an Albuquerque public school that closed down their shop program. Boo! I rescued it, brought it back to my shop, the boardroom. This video will show how I clean up this old tool, make some modern improvements, and put it to work. I'll also share some tool restoration pro tips along the way. Overall, it's in good shape. Pretty normal stuff, really. Some parts are crusty and frozen together. Some are loosey-goosey. From the looks of things, it just needs a good cleaning and lubricating. Pro tip, put fasteners back in place whenever possible. This will greatly reduce confusion during reassembly. I don't know what Powermatic was thinking when they put this guard over the foot pedal, but it's going into the garbage can. I would way rather hit my shin on the rounded edge of the foot pedal than the razor sharp sheet metal. The rear cover had some interesting surface rust. I would guess that this was either stored in an unconditioned warehouse for a long period of time or maybe even left outside for a few nights. Not a huge deal, but something to contend with. The first step is to break everything down. When doing so, I'm looking for bent, broken, or missing parts as well as stripped threads. Also, I try and pile the parts using at least some amount of logic. I keep fasteners with the parts that they hold. I put two parts that fit together, I put those next to each other, and so on. Side note, if you're wondering to yourself, why is Mike doing this? He's such a handsome fellow and could be doing many other things with his time. 2 points. Firstly, I really like rebuilding tools. I always learn a ton about how the tool works, which can often give me insights as to how better to use them. Also, these older industrial tools were so well made. They're heavy, the machining is really nice, and when they're in good condition, they're a pleasure to use. So I think it's well worth whatever amount of time it takes. It might not look like it, but this is organized. I like to use a diluted mix of simple green to clean all of the parts. It's a good enough degreaser, it's cheap, and it's less toxic than many other options. I pour that into this gizmo, which is called an ultrasonic cleaner, and it buzzes the water for lack of a better description. It really does a great job of cleaning grime off. Actually, it's really amazing. After that, I rinse the parts in clean water, and I place them in front of a space heater to dry. For the parts too big to fit into the ultrasonic cleaner, I spray them with Simple Green and scrub them with a pad. Once that's done, I rinse them down with fresh water in a spray bottle. This process requires both elbow and shoulder grease, not just your typical elbow grease. Once every part is as clean as I can get it, reassembly begins. This right here is the reason I like this tool. A heavy cast iron base and a one-piece cast iron column, which makes for a rigid and accurate tool. This is the support for the table. This square nut with Acme threading is how the table is raised and lowered. This is the table going back together. This joint allows the cutting of angled mortises, a feature I probably won't use, but it's nice to have. These pieces ride against the dovetails milled on the column. They allow for some adjustment so there's no slop between the column and the table. Time for another pro tip. Anytime there's a set screw pressing against a shaft, there's an opportunity for that shaft to become damaged should the set screw come loose. When this happens, I like to use a mill file to knock down any high spots on the shaft. This will help ease assembly, and it's the best option short of getting a new shaft. Speaking of which, this shaft has a gear on one end and a handle on the other. This is how the table is adjusted up and down. And on this tool, table height establishes mortise depth. The set screw allows for the gear to be adjusted in and out slightly to ensure that these pinion gears, I guess they're called, mesh well together. To help make sure the set screw won't back out again, I use a little thread locker. After adding a light coat of grease, I install the in-out part of the table. Same as before, these set screws allow me to tighten up until the fit slides easily, but the play has been eliminated. Of course, after getting the table dialed in just right, I realized I needed to install the shaft that drives the table in and out first. So the order goes shaft, bearing, table, another bearing, then the knob, and then a preload nut. And the preload nut allows adjustment so that I can remove backlash as the table is screwed in and out. This small spot is the only area on the whole tool that had noticeable wear. Kind of a bummer, but I could always have this shaft made if need be. It's fairly simple. So I add some blue raspberry grease to help prevent any further wear. This shaft and gear are what drive the table left and right. I need to start paying closer attention. I had to remove that gear to allow the table to slide on, then I was able to put the gear back on. Over the years, Powermatic has had a few different wheel options. This machine was apparently supplied with the smallest wheel they could possibly find. I'm not saying size always matters, but in this case, size matters. I found this larger wheel with the correct bore size, and it gives a much better control when adjusting the table. Also, it has a more nautical feel, which is cool if you're into that. This wacky contraption is the side-to-side stop, which establishes mortise width. It works okay, but it feels like an afterthought. Next up is the clamp. This is another feature I really like about this tool. I've owned a few other hollow chisel mortisers over the years, and none of them had what I would describe as a really good clamp. This is a neat design. It has a cast iron base, an Acme threaded rod for course adjustments, and a cam lock to lock the workpiece in place. Time for a song recommendation. Since we're dealing with a heavy metal object, I can think of no better time for a heavy metal song recommendation. Let's go with The Hellion Electric Eye by Judas Priest. Great song, totally wails. The solo is face melting. And you know what? Pay attention to the lyrics. Very apropos for our current time. The clamp is bolted to the table with a sizable bolt, and when all of this comes together, it makes for a very sturdy clamp. There are a bunch of these lubrication points around the machine, and I think this is just so cool. It's like the tool was built to last and not to be used and thrown away. Since shop class has been all but eliminated from our public school system, I'm taking it upon myself to share with the shop apprentice the joy that can be had from using one's hands. Next up is the gas pedal and the linkage that goes up to the drill head. It's not easy to see, but it really is a simple system. The foot pedal has a pivot point and two linkage arms that go up to the head. There's a spring in between the two linkage arms that add tension, and that tension is what forces the head to go back into the return or up position. And here's a quick look at how the upper pivot points come together. This is the tensioner spring, and this little bearing makes it easier to screw the knob the necessary 10,000 times needed to add enough tension. Please note how I do not put the second side of the lower spring mount back into its proper hole. And yes, I had to take all of this apart to fix that issue. I'm proud of the fact that I used no four-letter words this time because of the presence of the shop apprentice. All the knobs and gears and moving parts are irresistible to the shop apprentice. It's like catnip for apprentices. I should probably mention I don't restore tools to their brand new former glory as a tool collector would. I restore tools to use them. This is why I normally won't paint a tool, and I don't mind making modifications to a tool if it helps with functionality. Please note I have fixed the lower spring mount. All is well with the world. And of course I had to take it apart again. This bent bolt is the mounting point for the rear cover. Spring tensioner goes in for the umpteenth time. This is the top out thingy. It has a spring to soften the head returning to its up position. It also offers some adjustability to reduce the stroke. So the head plunges less, but the foot pedal starts off at a lower position. This is the last factory piece to go back on. It's the rear fence, and this sucker is heavy. It's like 3/8 inch thick plate steel. Next up, I needed a place to mount the VFD I'm going to use to power this guy. VFD stands for Variable Frequency Drive, and in this application it converts single phase to three-phase electricity, but more importantly, it allows me to control the speed of the motor. Full speed for the smaller bits, and I'll slow it down a little for the larger bits. I also add this cool work light. I also wanted a place to hold some tooling and accoutrement. The door to the VFD still opens, so I mount it up using the original mounting points. It's a little wobbly, but it works well enough and gives easy access to both tooling and sharpening cones. After having to backtrack several times throughout this assembly, I was hesitant to add the cotter pins. I did eventually find the courage. I made and installed a new MDF table. I also drilled and tapped a few holes to hold some fence shims. These shims are 2 pieces of 1-inch thick MDF. I'm using these to allow the work table to sit closer to the column. Without these, the work table is extended way out when working on thinner material. They reduce the work envelope of the table a little, but they can be removed fairly easily. Here's a favorite pro tip of mine. Add some sticky backed sandpaper. This will greatly help hold workpieces securely in place and prevent them from slipping. This works for any tool with a clamp, by the way. I guess I lied earlier. There are still a few more factory parts to go back on, the motor being one of them. So I install it and wire it up. Time to deal with the rear cover rust issue. I got some of that like rust stopper spray paint. It seems to work fine. If it becomes a bigger problem in the future, I'll sandblast and recoat. Here are a few detail shots. The VFD works great and it's easy to adjust the speed. The light is a helpful addition. If you're unfamiliar, the tooling used is a drill bit that's housed within a square chisel. The drill bit is mounted in a traditional Jacobs chuck. The chisel's mounted in a bushing using this set screw. Here's a look at the stroke or foot pedal adjustment. Well, I have some bits to sharpen and some fine tuning to do, but overall the machine works fantastic. It'll be a great addition to the shop, and if all goes to plan, you'll see this tool used in many future videos. Restoring and using old tools is a real pleasure. Thank you very much for following along. Till next time.